they see a guy who was an assassin. Mangioni was a cold-blooded first-degree murder assassin, and he wanted, for some reason, to assassinate the CEO of United Health. And the guy was from the lower classes. Mangioni was a spoiled brat, wealthy aristocrat, wealthy family, never really had to work. And so he gets his little hoodie on, and then he gets his little plan, and he shoots down a self-made guy from the Midwest.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup where we look at the stories of the day, and we've got El Salvador MS-13 gangbanger that has been deported. We have also Taylor Lorenz praising Mangioni and almost worshiping Mangioni. And then there's also finally Letitia James is being investigated. So stay with us and we'll come right back for those stories. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor's the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. It's called The Blade of Perseus, and you want to come there if you would like to read lots of things from Victor on history and politics and culture, actually, as well. So come to The Blade of Perseus, and please join us if you would like for special VDH Ultra material, 2 articles a week and 1 video that we do special for Ultra members. So please come join us. So Victor, we have this El Salvador gang member that was deported, Kilmar Garcia, and I had 2 things on him. First off, you have a U.S. Senator Chris Van Holten, I think, that is going down to El Salvador to, I don't know what, pick him up or something. And then also the more interesting thing was that the Trump administration said they made a mistake. And Rubio, of course, was the clearest to me on it. He said he's an illegal immigrant and we deported him back to his mother country.
I think they meant he made a mistake to put him in the high security prison as if he was an active criminal, although a district judge, an appellate court judge, he had been ordered to deport. He came in, he was ordered to go back. He resisted that order. He had I think 2 judges' independent assessment. He had been a member of the M13 gang. I don't know what good news. I've seen people in the San Joaquin Valley walking around with Chicago Bulls T-shirts and hats. That's supposed to be a gang, like the teardrop or whatever. But the point is, the El Salvador president, Bukele, just said, well, what are you people all upset about? I'm not going to send him. He's an El Salvadorian. He's one of our citizens. So since when do you get to tell us that you can take one of our citizens back once he's been deported? I mean, he's a citizen of El Salvador. He's subject to our laws right now. The other thing about it is they keep using this geographical nomenclature. He's a Maryland man. He's a Virginia man. He's a California man. He's a foreign national, but they always locate somebody without any distinction of his immigration status. So in theory, let's just say he's one of the 30 million people that came across, and all of them have been told that this administration's coming in and is going to finally enforce it. So they should all be applying for citizenship, green card, student visa. But if you're not and you're here illegally, then what's going to happen to you? You're going to be deported if you bump into a law enforcement. Anytime you'd be driving down this freeway and you get a ticket. Oh, you're not a citizen. You try to vote, right? You're not a citizen. And you don't have a green card or you don't have a student visa. You're not here legally. He's not here legally. And we're supposed to feel, it brings up a larger question, and that is, who are the champions of the Democratic Party that they're Khalil, a known Hamas supporter who was the Divest at Columbia group and was a spokesman for those violent protesters and that were unabashedly anti-Semitism. He's their, I don't know, he's their poster child. This former M13 is their poster child. Luigi Mangioni is their poster child. Why do they identify with these people that are antisocial or have been? I mean, what is so sympathetic about being? I live in an area where M13 is, and Norteños and Sureños, and they terrify a lot of people. So, what is so good? What I mean, does that count for anything? Does it count for anything that he's been here illegally and he knew he was deported? He came back. What is it about the law that people don't understand?
That's what Rubio said. He also just married the woman he had a baby child
Why
with.
didn't he marry her before?
I know, exactly. That was the weird thing. And she's out there arguing for him too.
I can tell you that if I go to a European country or a South American country and I go illegally and I'm deported, the next time I go down there, if I try to get in legally, I don't think I'm going to be able to get in. If they have any record, they won't. I know in Europe they won't. So I don't understand this because for last 22 years, I've flown every summer. And when I come into SFO, I've come into Newark, New York, I have seen maybe in 22 years, 3 or 4 people who don't have a passport or something's wrong. And they take them right over they get a security guard and they take them into a room for interrogation. They don't do that with people who cross the border illegally, knowing illegally. But if any of you listening are a U.S. citizen and you lose your passport on the plane, and then you come in and you try to tell the person, "Oh, I'm a U.S. citizen." Well, maybe they can go in a computer base and see that and give you a temporary slip and let you in, contingent on showing up at a passport office. But they're going to be a lot harder on you than we have been under the Biden administration on illegal alien.
I think that while we don't have to answer this question right now, we've been toying with this question for a long time, and that is the left's, both its leadership, but right now you were talking about its icons, the things that it's driving people to, and they just seem really off kilter. And it's surprising that they have as much approval as they do have. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, one poll had them down at 22, 29, 27. And so now there's a big revolution in the Democratic Party. This David Hogg, this really radical guy, he's 25. He's the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and he's calling to primary all I don't know there's any mainstream Democrats, but he wants to, in other words, he wants to get back to the issues that destroyed the party's brand and got Biden and then Harris out of office. And that is radical new Green Deal, Green New Deal, no fracking, Soros crime DAs, the whole DEI woke Black Lives Matter, the Antifa wing, the hate Israel wing, the hate Jews wing, that whole radical part of the Democratic Party, the pro-Hamas. He thinks that is going to energize the party and turn it over to young people. And they want to get rid of Pelosi. I have no problem with that. Schumer, all these people, but they are not even what they used to be. They have moved way to the left to cater to these people. And it's not going to work. It's playing into, there was just a Harvard Harris poll, almost, I think, on every single issue but one or two, the public is behind Trump. They're behind on the deportations. They're behind on DOJ. They're behind on pro-Israel stuff. They're behind on getting tough on everything. So I don't know what they're thinking other than they had this little civil war in 2020 when on that stage there was Spartacus, the Castro twin, there was Pete Buttigieg, Pocahontas, Bernie Sanders, and they were all leftist. And then there was Biden, and he was non-compos mentis. And he lost, of course, the Iowa caucuses, the New Hampshire primary, and the Nevada caucus. So he was going down fast. And the Carvel wing, the donor wing, they got together and said, these people are nuts. So we got to get them out of the primary. But they said, well, Joe's demented. I think Spartacus basically said that on stage in one of the debates. He said, I don't know what he's talking about. And they had a kind of a coup, and they gave Buttigieg a cabinet position. They let Bernie and Elizabeth Warren kind of run the agenda. And that's how they got Biden. And then that same coup process operated in reverse when they got rid of him. But I don't know. I don't think there's like more than 30% of the country or 25% embraces that agenda. And if they want to make that the mainstream brand of the Democratic Party, everybody would like that to happen who doesn't trust them. I mean, it would destroy the Democratic Party. That's what they're doing.
It seems like people like Josh Shapiro is their only hope of something
Fetterman type
mainstream.
person.
Yes, but I don't see how they're going to co-opt their extreme left with that
I
more
think they have to do what Bill
mainstream.
Clinton did, because after the McGovern years, remember McGovern ran in 72 and he got wiped out. And then they said, we've got to go back to the old standard that you cannot win as a Democrat because everybody thinks you're a nutty leftist after Truman and Kennedy were gone and the party, unless you have a Southern accent. So let's get this governor, Jimmy Carter. Well, he turned out to be left in one term. And then they said, we got to get some more Southern accents. So they got Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and they moved to the center. And their platform, as I've said many times, those many of 92 and 96 was very similar to the Republican Bush platform: closed borders, balanced budget, etc. But they had a sister soldier. Remember her? She was the rapper who had been calling white people all these names, and then they set up a little meeting where she was there and she didn't know it. And then Clinton came in and said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You've got to go. You can't." And everybody thought, "Wow, Democrat takes on black racism. I'll vote for him." And that's one of the reasons. And then Gore did win the popular vote. And then they went back to the Dukakis model, the McGovern model. 72, they lost the Northern Liberal loser model. And that was Dukakis. That was earlier McGovern, Dukakis. Then they had the little Southern thing, that the LBJ thing that works. And then in 2004, they went back to Kerry. And the only reason they won in 2008 and 12 is they had a niche, Barack Obama, and he ran as a moderate the first time, and then everybody felt they wanted to vote for a normal candidate who happened to be black. He wasn't a normal candidate; he was a hard leftist. But that's the only way they can win.
So since we were on the issue of Josh Shapiro, his governor's mansion was recently firebombed and his family was up sleeping and woken up to this burning of their home. And the assailant, I guess I can call him, Cody Balmer, said himself that it was the perceived, or this is a paraphrase, but the perceived ideas of Josh Shapiro. But he was also, I just want to make a note that Josh Shapiro and his family had just had a Seder in the governor's mansion, so they were practicing their religion.
He was an anti-Semite, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and pro-radical Palestinian. And that put the Democratic Party in kind of a dilemma, because Josh Shapiro went out and gave a good speech about whatever party you are, you can't engage in violence. I wish he had have done that more often when they tried to kill Trump twice, or they waged lawfare against him, or they went out and tried to vandalize and destroy Teslas, or they've threatened to kill Elon Musk. But I'm glad he was late than never. But the Democratic Party was, I mean, I didn't hear a lot of them. I didn't hear the squad come out or anybody come out and say, we've got to stop all this violence, because that's with a wink and a nod. I mean, if you have protest a year ago in Dearborn, that was a year ago, where they were calling for the death of Israel, death of America. And then they had a recent one where they had that guy on the video where he said he hated the United States and wanted to fight against it and destroy its empire. And that's kind of mainstream. And you see what's going on at the campuses with Harvard. And so what do you expect when you lower the bar? And then Mangioni, he's a rock star among a lot young Democrats. And then we had that poll by Rutgers that's self-identified. 50% of the people who said identified as left was over 50% said they wouldn't be bothered by Trump being killed. We don't have any civic education in this country, so these people don't know anything. They don't know anything about the Civil War. They heard the name Harriet Tubman, but they don't know anything about the causes or how it was fought. They don't know anything about the Depression. They don't know anything about that. They don't know anything about the people who came here. They don't know anything about World War I, World War II, and so they're so susceptible to just groupthink, and they're spoon-fed by these universities that are not even universities anymore. Yeah, so they see a guy who was an assassin. Mangioni was a cold-blooded first-degree murder assassin, and he wanted, for some reason, to assassinate the CEO of United Health. And the guy was from the lower classes. Mangioni was a spoiled brat, wealthy aristocrat, wealthy family, never really had to work. And so he gets his little hoodie on, and then he gets his little plan, and he shoots down a self-made guy from the Midwest. I have a United Health card. It's not a bad health concern, given what they have to put, what they have to do in California. 40% of the entire population, it's like 18 million people are on Medi-Cal. That is their hero. And an illegal alien who was a gang member is their hero. And Khalil, one of the instrumental, most prominent people advocating violence against Jews, is their hero. And they're always looking for these people, but they never say to themselves, wow, Trump got 99% of illegal immigration stopped without comprehensive immigration reform. And what do the people in the Rio Grande Valley feel like now that their communities are safe? They're not, all these people swarm. They don't think about things like that. They never do. They always want to identify with a trans athlete, but they never want to identify with the millions of women or hundreds of women who are endangered both physically and not in certain sports like volleyball or boxing like we saw in the Olympics. They don't care about that. It's always these iconic little feel good for this bi-coastal wealthy elite that makes them feel so good about themselves. And then they always think, well, I feel so good in the abstract to champion this M13 guy. And I really like my kid is one of the instrumental people at Columbia that shut down a class with his little Palestinian scarf on. But then they never say to themselves, I don't want to get anywhere. If I have to go to the Middle East, I'll stay in the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. I ain't going over to the West Bank. I'm not going to Iraq or Syria or Egypt. And the same thing about M13. I am not going to come into the San Joaquin Valley and live next door to gang members. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to champion them in the abstract. And that's why everybody got tired of them.
Well, you were very generous not to mention that a lot of it is women that are admiring these people like Luigi Mangioni, and Taylor Lorenz, of course, came out. And
She's
I'm a little bit
completely
ashamed of my sex because that weird phenomenon seems to obsess them. And then if you looked at those protesters with Hamas, same thing, lots of women out.
She's famous
Stupid,
for
like
being
stupid.
infamous. I mean, she was a sort of a columnist for the Washington Post. They finally got rid of her. All she did was get on the internet and bait people about wearing masks. You wore a mask and said everybody was going to kill you and you were a murderer if you didn't wear a mask. And now she's kind of detached and orphaned. She doesn't have really a platform, and so she's trying to get notoriety. So she thinks, well, this guy's kind of good looking, and I'll praise him and everything. And she said all of her superlatives about him.
Morally good.
Why
That
doesn't
was
she
the
go to the
worst.
family of the children of him, the executive was killed, and tell them that? And would she like somebody to do that to somebody in her family that they disagreed with? No. And what would she say if he was very homely? Would she even do that? Would she say anything? He's such a nice man, but he's ugly. But she said he's nice and he's handsome. So these people have no moral bearing at all, and it's mostly the rise of agnosticism, atheism, and lack of civic education and ignorance. I just get so tired of these young people who always protest. both left and right-wing journalists will ask them what they don't have any idea what they're doing. At least when I was at Santa Cruz and they were shutting down the campus because of the Cambodian bombing, I would go up to the protesters and I would say, "What are you doing this? We're doing this because Richard Nixon on this particular date bombed Cambodia and it was a secret mission and they used B-52s and they had napalm components and they knew something, you know what I mean? They were idiots, but they had the details around them. And they were educated by a prior generation that came out of the Depression. But these people, I don't know what's going to happen to the country when they take over.
I think that social media aggravates that. I was listening to Michelle Tafoya talk about social media, and she called it a cesspool. And she goes, "I know because I'm in it."
It is. These people, they have virtual lives, but they don't know how to do anything. They know all these little things on the internet, the fad, this hack, this, that, but change a sprinkler, change your tire, they can't do anything. They're helpless. And they're just, so now they're basically on the campuses, they're championing a death cult like Hamas. If they ever saw somebody like Hamas on their campus do what they did on October 7th, they would be terrified, I will bet you, and they will not go over. The protesters in Dearborn will not say, "I want to destroy the American empire, and I'm willing to fight for Hamas. I'm willing to fight." They said things like that. Well, you don't have to stay here. Nobody invited you. You wanted to come on your own volition. If you hate it so much, go over there. Why don't you go over there and get the Hamas mask on and tell the IDF, "I'm coming after you"? That would be consistent with the rhetoric, but it's always, this braggadocio and then nothing happens.
And in addition to that, since you went there was some protests in Canada. I want to talk about that after we come back from these important messages. Stay with us and we'll be back.
Let's be honest, we're not getting any younger, and if you want to look and feel your best, you need to check out Pure Health Research. They have 45 premium health supplements designed to help with every health goal, whether it's boosting your energy, trimming belly fat, supporting healthy blood sugar, pumping your testosterone up, or even reducing swelling in your legs. Pure Health Research Supplement Store has you covered. Each formula is crafted with natural, non-GMO ingredients backed by clinical research and manufactured right here in the USA. And here's the best part. Pure Health Research is offering you an exclusive 35% discount. Just go to purehealthresearch.com and use the coupon code VICTOR at checkout. With their 365-day money-back guarantee, there's zero risk in trying something new. So why wait? Head over to purehealthresearch.com now. Explore their 45 amazing supplements and save 35% before this deal ends with the coupon code VICTOR. Don't miss this chance to feel your best.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor at X. His handle is at VD Hanson. And you can join him on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So if either of those, speaking of social media, I know I just talked about social media being a cesspool, but it has its other side, which is a purveyor of information as well. So, well, Victor, in addition to those Dearborn Heights protesters who yelled that they would fight and die for Hamas or to destroy the American empire. We have in Canada a woman who was just trying to film the protest that was going on with pro-Hamas people, and the police came in and pulled her out and stopped her from filming. So Canada is a step up from the United States and trying to stop that.
That's going on while there's protests in Gaza, but it's against Hamas. In other words, the people are saying before October 7th, we may have said that we wanted to destroy Israel, but we were living okay. And then Hamas started to drill these tunnels and stole all the money, probably a couple of $1 billion. And then they put it under hospitals, schools, and mosques. And now we paid the price and we want them out. A lot of people want them out. But again, it's all performance art. It's all theatrics. There's no consequences. It's all like the internet or online or the World Wide Web, social media. You just say things, but there's no real follow up consequence to it. And that's why there's a whole little subgenre of videos. Sometimes people send them to me where there's a guy who acts really smart and then somebody flattens him. Somebody sent me one today about a bouncer in Thailand, very polite Thai, and this big English guy said, he was harassing the customers, and the person said, don't do that. The bouncer, and he said, oh, I'll take my shirt off and of course, what does he think people in Thailand, whom do they hire to be bouncers? Thai kickboxers, right? So this kind of flabby looking Thai guy just flattened him with one punch, and that went viral. And that shows you there's some kind of deep desire among people that they're tired of all of this talk, and they like people that's why the Clint Eastwood type or Shane, they just like that. It's hardwired into us. That's like Letitia James. So she she cooked up this weird law that nobody had ever used about insurance fraud. And then she ran prior to that. She said, I'm going to get Trump, basically. And she ran on that. And then it was the Deutsche Bank says, we gave a loan. We have good auditors. They're better than yours. And we know what his property is worth. And we charge off interest and made a profit, and he paid everything back ahead of time. So we'd like to make another. You don't know what's good for you. He's a crook. He overvalued this. He signed this document. And they said, no, people in this corporation signed it. And she said, no, that doesn't matter. And he went back and then find him. And then we find out that for years, she's been claiming that her chief residence is in Virginia, and she's the Attorney General of New York. You have to be a resident there for, I think, at least 5 years. And then to get a break on her loan, she's lied about the size of the apartment unit she was investing in. And there's rumors now, it was on Fox today when I was driving back from Stanford, that she claimed her husband was her father. Yeah, that maybe she should talk to Ilhan Omar how that works. But anyway, it's nemesis. They don't understand there really is in all literature of the West and the East. There's this religion. There's this divine, all-knowing. What Hesiod said, the eye of Zeus sees everything. And in Greeks, it's nemesis that always is called upon to correct hubris, and it leads to ate and destruction. And what comes around goes around, karma. But they don't think that it ever affects them. So now she is going to be probably indicted, and she's going to be indicted for falsely filling out affidavits that she accused Trump of, which he didn't do. And maybe the Justice Department will try to fine her $400 million.
She definitely looks more guilty than whatever she was trying to do to Trump.
Well, Fannie Willis is also, I mean, she's facing legal. They had to drop the case, and now she didn't turn over documents that were requested. The judge's ordered to do that. I think they're going to hold her in contempt if she doesn't. She's got the Nathan Wade. Then we have Jack Smith that didn't report his income free, $180,000 of free legal service. I'm sure Alvin Bragg has a lot of exposure, but they've got 3 out of the 4. And I'm sure that he will be the next bowling pin to fall down.
Well, let's turn to a governor, Gretchen Whitmer, who came to the White House, and she wasn't ordered out as who got ordered out? It was Zelensky, but she did hide her face when the cameraman came in to take publicity pictures.
She said she didn't.
Files.
Yeah, she said she thought it was a private meeting. What politician would ever think that you go see Donald Trump in the White House and there's not going to be media there? And she had a blue dress and a blue folder. It looked like it was almost color coordinated plan. But what did she think that was going to do? And then she kind of laughed it off. She said, she could have said I was just lying. I admired her because she did admit she was trying to hide. But it's like Gavin Newsom. He says that he's not going to allow. He doesn't like transgendered men in women's sports, and then he resists the Trump order, and she says that she's going to work with Trump, and then she doesn't want anything to do with him. They don't understand that people are not stupid. She's going in there to try to figure out the tariffs and the UAW coming out. UAW is a big force still in Michigan. And she's trying to figure out where the politics are because they like Trump, the UAW, even though they didn't get endorsed by the leadership. About 70% estimated voted for him. And these tariffs are very popular, but her party, who used to love tariffs because Trump's fingerprints are on tariffs now, they hate him. So she doesn't want to do a Bill Maher and be nice to Trump. But she wants to go in quietly and sneak so nobody can see her and say, Mr. Trump, here's my advice on the tariffs. Go do this, this, this. And can I take some credit? That's what she wants. But she doesn't want to work with Trump. She wants to act like she's sick of him, mad at him. She would never be caught dead in the White House. That kind of attitude. Like Gavin I haven't heard from Gavin's podcast lately. I don't know what happened
Yeah,
to
where
him.
did it go? He hasn't, there's
I
been
think
no.
that he kind of bombed. It was kind of like Michelle and her brother's podcast.
Yeah.
Remember that was going to be, she had that best-selling memoir and she was going to just be the next Joe Roganess, and then it didn't work.
Yeah, it just went
Speaking of Joe
off.
Rogan, he had, who did he have on there? The British scholar who wrote about Europe and immigration. And he challenged Joe Rogan about having Daryl Cooper and other ones on. Some of his guests, and I guess fueling conspiracy theory. I don't know if that's a good thing if you're asked to be on a show to ambush the host that invited you, to kind of cross him up in lifetime. I've done a lot of interviews on these podcasts. I don't know how I'd feel if somebody came in and said, Victor, why are you doing this? That was pre-planned. Douglas Murray was the person. But he had a point, and that is, if you got 70 million people and you bring in somebody who basically said, yeah, I'm not saying you're not going to mess your hair up if you're the Wehrmacht and you go into Ukraine, things happen when there's a whole documentary history of the hunger plan of deliberate policy to starve and kill Jews. And you're ignorant of that. And then you say that they firebombed the Black Forest and that was a terror campaign during the German invasion of France. So the Germans are invading France and starting this next cycle of World War II after Poland and the Low Countries. And then he says this is a terror campaign to burn up the Black Forest. But he doesn't know anything about the repositories of weapons and things that were hidden in the Black Forest. And then the idea that they were going to burn it down with they didn't have napalm yet. It didn't even work. They didn't do any damage. They tried to bomb some stuff and they thought they would catch fire and then stop their fueling and launch areas and logistic. It didn't even work. But this idea that they were terrorists and it's just crazy.
So, Victor, I was wondering if you looked at or saw or listened to the brilliant speech given to us by Joe Biden recently,
I
where
did.
he talked about and tried to fearmonger Social Security.
By the way, he was getting paid for that. It was a paid speech. He's on the lecture circuit. I guess Hunter's can't shake people down because he has nobody that's of any value. By the way, before I answer that question, all these tell-all books now feel they can tell the truth about how they lied to us and there was a cabal to try to pass off Joe as normal. There's going to be a next round of books about how crooked these Bidens were. How they said, how dare you? He didn't do. That's all going to come out too. And we're going to get that next. But the point is, he has no currency to shake down anybody. Nobody wants his influence. He has no influence. So Hunter's out of a job. His paintings are not there anymore. And Joe has no income. So he's now on the lecture circuit. So he was going to speak an hour, but it was so painful. After 30 minutes, he just quit. The weird thing was they had the entry music, and he got on the podium. He started talking when the music was on. He didn't even know it. I mean, I can't hear very well, but my gosh, I've never done that. And then he started talking, and the theme was decency. But you know how Joe talks about decency? He gets that get off my grass, Krabby Appleton look, and he grimaces.
Indecent.
We got decency, and I never anything like the people. We're not nice to you, decent. And you look at him, and he's just a mean, ill-spirited, tiny little person. He's morally bankrupt. And then when he was talking about that, I thought to myself, well, who's the one who called half the country semi-fascist? Who's the one that called them garbage? You did. You called them chumps. You called them dregs. You were one of the most divisive people we've ever seen. I thought, well, I wonder if he's going to be a racist. And sure enough, ta-da! I remember when I turned this video on last night, and I thought, well, he likes to use the word Negro. He said that about Satchel Paige, which is an ossified term now. And then he said he had 2 boys that worked for him, African American. I don't need to get into the corn pop saga. It was really racist about how he I just took out some chain, I cut off some chain, I tore corn pop. And then I had all these black kids. They looked at my golden hairs on my leg. Never seen anything like it.
That was a good imitation. It was as ununderstandable as...
It was. It couldn't understand a word. And then you remember he said Barack Obama was the first articulate, clean black candidate. He told all these black professionals that they're going to put you back in chains. Romney, of all people, is going to put you back in chains, as if a CEO of a big company is going to be a slave again, according to Joe. So he has a whole repertoire. Remember he bragged that he was from Delaware, a slave state? I got a lot of black people. I'm from Delaware. It was a slave state. So he's insane. He's completely unhinged. So then he says, well, there was decency when I was growing up. There was a bus with a little bunch of colored kids in it. Joe, you're showing your racism. Remember he said that, what did he say? His mother was in danger when he was in his law and order mode and he didn't want a jungle. He's a complete racist. He's a complete moron. He was always mediocre. He was a plagiarist, and he probably, and I think the left is going to disown him. They don't want him. They've asked people, do you want him on the campaign trail? No. Did you see him? We do not want him. They blame him they've created another narrative that if Kamala just had another 2 months, if Joe hadn't have run, it's 2 narratives. They say she just had 2 months, if he got out in May, we could have outbeat him by more than $1 billion. We raised $1 billion more than Trump. We could have had another $1 billion. Or if he had gotten out when he should have gotten out, we would have had a reopened primary, and we would have had Josh Shapiro or Gavin. They would have lost too, but all these people that said he was fit as a fiddle, sharp as a tack, great administration, Anthony Blinken and Josh Sullivan are going around bragging of all the disasters they did. All you have to do is look at the border. They told us for 4 years we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need more courts. Of course, we can't do Mallorca. No, we just needed a new president that followed the law, and he solved the problem in 30 days.
I know we've been talking about the social media as the swamp, but it's also the fact checker. You really can't get away from it. And the Democrats seem to think they can. That's the thing. They do all this stuff and they think they're gonna just slide around and not somebody's not gonna come back up with it.
They're the majority but the actual people who say they're fact checkers are all leftists and liars. But there is a fact checker, you're right, and that is the mob. That is the mob. You can't fool the mob. 51%. There's people that spend all day on the internet, thousands of them, and they'll check everything you say. I've had people write back. I had I said that when Germany in World War I crossed through Denmark, I might even have said invaded. And I got a fact checker within a nanosecond. And he said, technically it was a forced entry corridor. He started giving me all these. I said something about the Maginot Line, and you get everything. I mean, it's good because you have to be honest. You can't lie to people like Biden and I don't know. It's just, The one thing that's very remarkable is if we had this conversation a year and I said, and I didn't know, of course, I couldn't predict either, that the Obamas would be completely discredited, that Barack Obama would be disliked by everybody, that they would be publicly talking about a divorce. She would have a bomb podcast. The Bidens would be discredited. Nancy Pelosi would be 86 and couldn't give it up and was barking at the moon. Chuck Schumer was being forced out by his own people. It's the whole hierarchy. There's nothing there. And Fetterman, who couldn't answer a question in the 2022 election, he sounds like Socrates now compared to those guys.
That's very flattering, Victor. But Trump, on the other hand, is off to the World Wrestling Associate. Did you see that? Those
Yes, I
crowds
did.
love him, and they have. Because we were talking about his ratings, I thought that was ages 30 to 49, 52% approve of him, and 50 to 64, 51%. So he's over 50% on everywhere, and he's obviously loved by the people.
The Democrats know that if they've lost the youth vote, the 18 to 30 vote, and it's almost even now, and they have lost the Hispanic vote, it's 50-50. Hispanic males is 55, he lost. Then there's no way they can win. The only way they can win is to go win back like Obama did, a large percentage. Doesn't have to get 50%, but they need to get 46% of the white vote, and they can't do that. They're losing it. It's just everything in the news that comes from the left, like the tragedy in Texas where the guy stabbed in the heart, and a left-wing, she was a Republican, but a left-wing African-American judge let that guy out that stabbed him in the heart. That was just insane. And then they had a GoFundMe, and he takes the money, $400,000, and buys a house. Why wouldn't he buy counsel? That's what people gave him the money for. Go hire a Wall Street, New York, I don't know, crack criminal defense team. But instead you go buy a house, and he becomes a cause celeb. So that's another thing that's weird. He's a cause celeb, the African-American teenager. We're back to Trayvon Martin. He was a great kid. He wasn't scouting out things. He didn't try to beat up some. And that is another left-wing icon. George Floyd was another one. They can't just get a person that is normal, hardworking, lawful. That's too boring for them. They got to have an ex-gangbanger who's been deported, or they have to get a pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic guy he's their hero, or they have to get Mangioni, an assassin, or they have to get a 17-year-old who I just got lost and I went over to the other side of the stadium where I didn't belong, and then I sat down and I got an argument with somebody, and I don't know, I felt that I had a perfect right to take a knife that I carried concealed out of my bag and stab him in the heart and run away. That's their hero.
Who knows where that left is going to go after this? I just don't see them making it through all this. But let's go ahead and take a break, Victor, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about Sanders and AOC, who seem to be the ones leading the party in a sort of way. But wait one moment and we'll come back from these messages.
Listen, Americans are fed up with Big Pharma controlling health care, raising prices, restricting access, and making it harder to get the medications they need. That's why more people are turning to All Family Pharmacy. You've probably heard of them. They're a family-owned pharmacy in Florida that does things differently. They put you first, giving you the freedom to order what you need, when you need it, so you're never without essential medications. From ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine to antibiotics, daily maintenance meds, and emergency kits, they make sure you have access to the treatments you need without restrictions. They know how important it is to stay prepared, which is why they make it easy to stock up and order treatments in bulk. It's simple. Just order online and they ship your meds to your door. You don't even need your doctor involved. They work directly with licensed doctors to get you the prescriptions you need. Visit their website today and get 10% off your order. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Victor and use the code Victor10, that's Victor10, to get 10% off your order today.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Please come join us at the Blade of Perseus. I know that we've had some trouble with videos and audios, and we are working on those troubles both for the website on an internet browser and on the app. And for all of you out there who, most of you very young probably know it, but the app is a different beast from the internet browser interface. So we're working on it and it's getting better and better all the time. So hopefully you can come back and join us there. So Victor, the Sanders and AOC went on a tour of the United States and they finished up at their last place in, I think it was Idaho in Boise. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this.
Well, it's an
How they did.
anti-oligarch, anti-plutocrat, anti-aristocrat, and all. Why now? It's just, I guess they got together, Hakeem Jeffries and Pelosi and Schumer or the squad, and they said, wait, we got to get an angle. We got to go after Musk. The polling we've terrorized Tesla. We've got him down to below 50%. Let's call him an oligarch, wealthiest man in the world that's running things. And then somebody said, well, we got to be careful about that because the oligarchs were our guys. Zuckerberg gave $419 million to us in 2020 to warp the registrars. Soros has given over $250 million over his career. Michael Bloomberg spent $1 billion. Bezos was one of our big guys. We love oligarchs. That's who we are. And then Bernie Sanders is stand up there when he has a townhouse in Washington. He's got a lakeshore, a house on the lake. He's got a house. He's got 3 homes. And his wife, remember, was a president and then bankrupt the college and jumped out in time and got a nice fat retirement while everybody else went broke. So it's not working to say that these awful, especially when Trump, that's what drives him so crazy because he's not Mitt Romney. He's not, remember when John McCain ran, they said he had 11 homes. Well, they don't do that with Trump because he just says, I'm a billionaire and I earned every penny and I'm happy and I like money and I like successful people. I like people who look good on Fox. What do you do with that? I mean, he's just open. He's so transparent. He's not hiding anything. He thinks people that make a lot of money are smart. He says that. And then they go, well, let's go look at his agenda. And it just worked. Well, no, it's like, I'm going to not tax people for tips. He still thinks he's going to do that. I think I'm going to reclassify it not as a senior fellow at Hoover, but a contract tipper. And just get paid in tips. But anyway, he has this middle class agenda. He talks about my farmers, our workers, and they look at this and they think, well, we were always dealing with the freedmen people in the Democratic and the Republican Party, so we were for tariffs. But now he stole that issue from us. So now we'll be Milton Friedman just because we'll be the opposite. They're going on the opposite of what Trump is now without any consistency. So you don't know what they're for other than they hate Trump and they're nasty people and they'll do anything to destroy him.
They are drawing crowds of, the last one was over 12,000 people came outside of Boise to listen to Bernie Sanders bloviate and AOC. She seems to have mellowed out a little, and the people are talking about they think she's going to try to run in 2028, and they talk that there's a lot of energy behind that. I don't know your thoughts.
She's dropped her barista Valley Girl patois, and she's now she has actual different accent. I listen to it. It's kind of, well, it's kind of a precise technocrat. And she's trying to nurse herself or bone up or re-educate herself as a serious person. But she's a socialist. She said she was. She's a socialist. She hates Israel. And I don't think that, because the Democrats are the plutocratic party. Remember when Kamala Harris, one day, Joe's gone, Kamala's there, 24 hours later, it was 80 million bucks. So they are the party of the plutocracy. And I don't think they're going to give to her.
Oh, really? So do you
Not that
completely discount a 2028 effort,
I hope
or
she's a
yeah?
nominee, but I don't think she will be. And I think that J.D. Vance would have her for lunch if he's the nominee, or DeSantis, whoever it is.
All right, let's turn to another, since you brought him up, Jeff Bezos. He launched his spacecraft, Blue Origin, and took a few women outside of the ozone layer and up into space, and then brought them back, and they're all safe and
It was a nice
happy.
flight. I mean,
Yeah.
the rocket looked impressive, the capsule, but what was cui bono for what? Who been? I mean, it was just to take a movie star and some prior female astronauts, his girlfriend, his fiance, and dress them all up, and then say this is the feminist moment. That they're all. You really believe that the people who designed the rocket and the people who organized the launch and pushed the button and the guys that picked up the capsule when it hit the desert or wherever were all women? So it was a stunt. And then you had the interview when one of the astronauts, female astronauts, started correcting people and say, it's not mankind. It's not mankind. That distinction goes back to Latin homo and we're, there are different words in the vocabulary, but they're out of that came the idea that mankind means men and women. But she was saying, don't say mankind. I guess you can't say manhole either, or manhunter, or I don't know what. But that it was all performance art. It went up a little bit and came down. Meanwhile, you've got. I think he was trying to get back his public acclaim and get some attention away from SpaceX. And here, meanwhile, you got these gigantic rockets, these monster, biggest rockets have ever been created that Musk has, and they just take off and they go where they're supposed to, and then they either propel themselves back and land at the, on a launching pad or even on a ship. And it's just incredible. And he wants to go to Mars. He saves the astronauts. He's so far ahead of everybody. I was thinking that the other day when they were all talking about Elon Musk, all these mediocrities, Schumer and all these people. It's very hard to think of what the country would be like right now if it wasn't for him. So we're using the internet, and this is a rural area, and there's no landline. I've never had a landline, and I'll just be honest, I had used bad. I've had every different company, and then all of a sudden Starlink, and I've got fast internet. He's helped millions of people, including the Ukrainians at war. And Tesla, I mean, everybody's so angry, but when you look at part of the reason that the United States is energy self-sufficient is we're not using the amount of oil given the rise in population that was predicted. And some of it is that in many states, Tesla's the best. So I know people are going to say, well, Victor, but we're spending more money to generate electricity with coal or natural. Yeah, I know that. But you can see where he's going. And you can see that I went back and looked at what stories were saying around 2010 and 15. They said the American space program was ossified. They didn't really know, there's no real vision where they want to go to the moon. They want to make another space lab, space station, Mars. The Atlas rocket was ossified. It's gone. We don't have the big rocket anymore. China's coming up, Europeans. And he just blew all that away. One man with this, and then nobody would be, the whole X or Twitter, it's just completely changed. Does anybody think if he had not bought X, do you think that Mark Zuckerberg would be giving all these mea culpas? Oh, I was forced by the FBI. I'm so sorry. No, he wouldn't be doing that. You think that Bezos would be saying things about, well, we're not going to endorse a candidate, or No, he created this whole new. He was beloved by the left, but he's changed the life of a billion people, and to just discount him by these mediocrities that haven't done anything, it's really like Tim Walz. Call him an A, call him a dip, S-H-I-T, and an A-H-O-L-E. Remember that? And then he was bragging about the stock. What have you ever done, Tim? What have you ever done but ruin your state? You were the most pathetic vice president. I asked myself this. I said to myself, everybody mentions Agnew. So I went back and looked at Spiro Agnew and nattering nabobs of negativism, he said. I looked at some of his speech compared to Tim Walz. He was articulate. He may have been crooked. I don't even know if he was crooked. They kind of wanted to get rid of him because of Watergate and get somebody else in there. But he was articulate. He looked good. He was well compared to Tim Walz. He has to be the worst. He would have been the worst vice president in history, Tim Walz. He's like a puppy dog too. He just goes and growls and tries to bite people, and then he looks at you like, I know I'm pathetic. I'm sorry. He said that. He said sometimes I can be I know he said some pejorative about himself. He knows who he is.
Absolutely. And your point that Bezos doesn't measure up to Elon is excellent. He doesn't even measure
I
up to
admire
Elon
Jeff
as far
as a
as
person that lives out in the country, and I say to myself, do I want to drive to Fresno to get this part? Pipe fitting, or I want to go to into town, and then I just go on Amazon, and if you order in 4 hours, you can get your sprinkler coupling. And I do that all the time. I don't know how they do it. I do not know how they do it. You can order anything, anything. You can order a vitamin, you can order a shirt, you can order a light bulb, and they deliver it to your door. I don't know how
that
they
is
do it.
true. Absolutely.
How will you get that is the work of genius the guy did.
Well, let's compare them on children. Jeff Bezos, I don't know if he even has children, and all he has is does he have some children from
Yeah, I
an
think he
earlier
does.
wife and a new fiance? And Elon apparently has a new interview out about his 13 kids, and I'm not sure. I didn't watch it because I'm not really big into people's private lives, but
Well, he thinks that we're all suffering fertility collapse, and he's absolutely right. We're 1.6. And it happened very abruptly. My generation, I'm 71, but I had 2 siblings and 2 first cousins that were like our siblings. And we should have had 15 children, and we had over 15 children. And then that next generation, we should have had 10 children, 5 of us to replenish our duty of the population, the demographic, and we had over 10. 3, yes. And then that 10 should have had 20. Well, that 10's not even close. And not even close. I think half of the 10 are not married. So in their 30s. And that's a phenomenon now that people are not having children. They're not getting married. They're not buying a home. And when I wrote The Dying Citizen, I was shocked at the statistics on how the age of first marriage to first child to first home purchase has gone way up by about 4 years in each category. It's like everybody's thinks they're going to get 6 units in environmental studies at Boise U or Fresno State or something, and for the next 8 years on student loans and just waste away their 20s. That's why this Harvard thing is so fascinating. To spend $2.2 billion to Harvard University, and that money. I like the Harvard president. I don't know if you heard him, but he wrote a long letter about academic free speech, and then Barack Obama weighed in and said it was ham-handed. So I wrote a column today. It'll come out tomorrow, Thursday, and I was just fascinated about Harvard's attitude, because they don't have to take any money. And there's a good example, Hillsdale. Hillsdale doesn't take any money, but Hillsdale it's immune from all those federal dictates. But every time there's a Democratic administration state, in Michigan or in they try to pick on Hillsdale. They hound them. If they have a national survey under Obama, every college has to give how many years it takes to graduate, what their majors success rate are in employment. They'll deliberately leave Hillsdale out. And they've gone after them. Like if you had a scholarship from the veterans scholarship to go that was federal, then you couldn't use it at Hillsdale. They did everything. So Harvard doesn't understand that they can do whatever they want. If they want to have anti-Semitism, I guess they can do it. They're doing it, but not on our dime. 2.2 billion. And then they're so oblivious. I was thinking, what would happen right now? They had 500 Harvard students. You remember they went out and ransacked. They broke and disrupted classes. They intimidated Jewish students. They went out in the street. That was about a year ago or 2 years ago. And then they just went into the Kennedy School of Government, disrupted something. They do it all the time. And it's the thin veneer, it's underneath, it's pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. That's why, do they ever get self-reflective? Did the president ever say, let me think a minute. The Supreme Court just ruled against us and said we were systematically racist and we discriminated for years against Asian Americans and we lost that. And so we're on official record of being racist. We can't do that anymore. And then does he take a pause? We have $150 million shortfall in our donor class. Why did the donors not give $150 million like they do every year, you think? And does he ever say, why did Claudine Gay quit? Because the congresswomen had her for lunch and just said, can you just show us what you did, an actual fact, to stop anti-Semitism? And can you define when you would stop it? She couldn't. And then she was a plagiarist. So Harvard, you're the two things I take away from this is that you have a remedial math class now for everybody. They can't do your regular work given your admissions policy. And number two, your president was a plagiarist. A long-term plagiarist. So you're completely discredited. You've dropped, as I said in our law school, I did a video, you're dropped out of the top 5 law schools. Come on. I mean, you can do all this stuff on your own dime. You have a $50 billion endowment and you don't need it. And so my advice is go full Hillsdale. Just say, you know what, take your money and blank, blank, Harvard, we're going to just do our thing as a liberal utopia. But, they won't do that. And so Hillsdale has principles. Hillsdale says, we don't take federal money from the Reagan administration, the Bush administration. We don't care who the administration. We don't believe that the federal government represents the true spirit of freedom and the Constitution. They're always getting in our business. It's not political with us. We just don't want it. But Harvard is now saying, we're going to stand up to Donald Trump. And I guess they're saying, we don't want your $2.2 billion. Well, they're going to try to get it, but it's selective. In other words, if it was a liberal president and he was going after Hillsdale, they would be all for it. They never said a word when they went after Hillsdale. So my point, Harvard, is this. Go call Larry Arnn on the phone and say, how did you guys do this? And we will pay you guys $1,000 an hour to send your team over to tutor us how you break away from the federal government. And we will not take a dime from a Republican or a Democratic administration. And then we can do our pro-Hamas all we want and disrupt all the classes we want. And we can push Jews around on campus. And of course, Hillsdale doesn't do any of that. If you were a Jewish American student and you wanted to be the safest place in the United States on a campus, I suggest you go to Hillsdale. They want it both ways. We want our money, and we want to be morally superior, and we want to discriminate. We want separate dorms based on race, and separate graduation based on race, and admissions based on race. And we're Harvard, and got to be some Supreme Court. What, 3 or 4 went to Harvard? They'll help us out. Everybody will help us. We're Harvard. No, you're remedial math, you. That's what they are.
They are. I know. Well, that's what they're turning themselves into. That's for sure. So one more thing about the criticism, especially of Donald Trump. Janet Yellen has come out to say about his tariffs policy that if people think that it's going to bring back manufacturing to the United States, that's a pipe dream. That's her word, pipe dream.
That's what Obama said, you remember?
So,
They're gone. Donald Trump, what does he think he's doing? They're gone. They're
do you think
gone.
Janet Yellen is wrong, though? That's my...
Well, I mean, Barack Obama said just what she did, but before she said it,
Yeah.
he said, Donald Trump, yeah, he's going to can't bring manufacturer. They're gone. Remember, he said that about the clingers too. He said, they get mad, they go to their religion, they're gone. You know, globalization, they're loser. They're not like the Obamas, grifters that can make $300 million as Netflix content contributors. But in any case, Janet Yellen was the Treasury Secretary, and people from all sides of the political spectrum, Larry Summers even, big leftist, said, there's three things happening when Joe Biden took over. We have 1.26 inflation. Until COVID, we had really good growth, but the economy is roaring back now. There is suppressed demand. And more importantly, we still have supply chains globally that are interrupted. So if you've got everybody cooped up for 2 years and they want to buy a car, a refrigerator, or their dryer broke, right? They're going to go out and buy, but they can't get the stuff because I can remember a mile away, there was a used car lot that popped up. Nobody could get a car. Every sudden, everybody was a car salesman in 2021. And so what they said to him is, don't print money. Because if you print all this money, $7 trillion, build back better. Inflation, that was an Orwellian term. Inflation should have been called the Inflation Guarantee Act. It was called the Inflation Reduction Act. So he printed $7 trillion and spread it out. And everybody went hog wild with all this cash. And he got the annual inflation rate up to 9% at one point. And staples over his 4-year career, staples were things like, food, electricity, insurance. They went up like 20 to 30%. And so my point about Janet Yellen is she was the one that told us that there would be no inflation. There might be a price rise. It'll just be a temporary adjustment. And now why do these people who ruin the border give lectures when it's safe? Why do the people who ruin the economy now we had great news on inflation. We had great news in March on jobs. If he gets it, Japan is just about ready to cut a deal today. Why do these people who fail come back and say,
fail again?
I know it. And what did Biden say? I have $100, 100 days. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, we saw something far worse. And then he walked out. It was so sad. And I thought, now that he has no ability to punish or reward, and these sycophants that surrounded themselves, they're all on the news now. And they're saying things like, it was worse than you think. You have no idea. We had to get fluorescent tape to have little footprints so he knew where to go. He just couldn't do anything. We had to have big print. We had to give him. He didn't. It was just incredible what went on. These are the same. Corinne Jean-Pierre. That's a fake. That's a cheap fake. How dare you? What does she say right now? Sharp as a tack. What's Joe Scarborough say? I never saw a more cogent Joe Biden. I've known him for 30 years.
So let's hope that the broader U.S. population sees that they lied before or were wrong before in the case of Janet Yellen, and they're probably wrong now.
Well,
I think they are.
Lied about the Steele dossier. They lied about the laptop. They lied about the Ping Axios Bank. They lied about the lawfare. They lied about Mar-a-Lago raid. They didn't really tell us that we're finding out things about January 6th that are incredible. It wasn't an armed insurrection. 9 people didn't die. They lied about that. They lied about the campaign. They lied. I just remembered something as I'm talking, and I'll shut up. But 4 days 4 days before the election of 2024, I was at work and somebody said to me, I think Harris is going to win easily. I said, not a chance. And the Iowa poll hadn't come out. The Des Moines Register saying that she was going to win by 3 points. She lost by 12. But so I went on, I said, what? Oh, you should look at the PBS poll. So I went into my office and I looked at it. The PBS, and it was a joint poll with three other, they had Kamala Harris up by 4 points beyond the margin of error. 4 days before that was a public entity. They were just completely lying and trying to build momentum and depress people from going out to the polls that were going to vote for Trump. So they lied about that too. They lied about the election the whole time. She was never ahead. She was never ahead. Trump was always ahead.
And it makes you wonder. It definitely does. Don't they get it? That
Nothing
they're
can be.
all going to be found out. Well, Victor, I have a comment on your 25 thoughts on 25 thoughts on, quote, China would lose a trade war with the U.S. gradually, then suddenly. And here is Mike Burnson, and he writes, and he's writing, just so the audience knows, the Chip and Science Act was intended to help foster manufacturing research and that kind of thing. And he's also going to call the Inflation Reduction Act the Inflation Perpetuation Act.
That's better than mine.
Anyway, this is what Mike has to say. I find it quite distressing that in the 5 years since COVID was introduced to the world, American companies have not fully developed alternate supply chains. 5 years is more than enough time to design, build, and bring online production for pharmaceuticals, computers, chips, and almost everything that we still import from a committed adversary. The CHIPS Act did absolutely nothing to address the technology component. The Inflation, quote, Perpetuation Act made conditions worse by pumping hundreds of billions into a global warming fraud machine, making us more dependent on China panels. And the EPA has been even more aggressive in damaging U.S. business, a large component of offshoring going back 30 years or more. And then I have before you comment on that, I have a second one by Mike Wilson, who is updating it, things that happened since you wrote it. And he goes, not sure when you wrote this, Dr. Hanson, but as of today, April 14th, that was 2 days ago, President Trump blinked, excusing many Chinese electronic products from the tariff. I had vainly hoped that the president was going to wall off China. Perhaps this is not feasible, so.
He's going to wall it off, but he's going to start with a 4-foot wall, then a 6-foot wall, then an 8-foot wall. But the problem is that China's insidious. So they have outsourced a lot of their stuff to Vietnam and Mexico. So it's going to be much harder. Nicole Wallace, the former Bush communications director, she was the one assigned to help Sarah Palin and tried to sabotage her. And now she's a left-wing fanatic. She was on, I was driving, I happened to turn to CNN, or she and MSNBC, I think. Anyway, I was listening to her and she was lamenting. She said, this is so mean that what Trump's doing, all Americans they can't go to China, they can't go to Walmart and buy cheap China stuff. And I'm thinking, well, a lot of it's built by the Uyghurs. Is that okay? You know, but she was lamenting that I never, you'd think that she would say it might be a little bit higher, but maybe we can produce things. It's so weird about all these economists. They're just finding new and new ways to get outraged. They say things like, we don't have to make masks. That's a third world thing. And then I remember the Wall Street Journal, everybody said right when COVID hit, we don't have enough masks. N95, can you believe it? Yeah, we need to make all that stuff for security reasons and others. National pride and
pharmaceuticals in particular. Yeah.
And then there's another one they say is, we don't, I guess they want us to have sweatshops. We're not going to get it. we don't need in the year 2025 to have a bunch of people in a long table putting together widgets. That's no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a 1.6 fertility rate nation that's underpopulated as far as future growth of population. It's an aging population, but we'll have robotics, AI. We're supposedly the leader. We're going to have sophisticated factories where it will be very productive. And American labor, by the way, has gone up in its productivity as far as wage increases versus productivity. It's been way ahead of Europe and Japan, the American worker. Part of that's because of automation, but part of it is, American workers are very productive. So we need to bring all that back, and it will be a wonderful thing when it is. It's funny is that I just remember growing up that everything on this farm that was copper or brass, if I would go out and see a faucet, it would say something like casting Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if I would go look at a car, it was Detroit, Michigan. Or if I would go look at a disc blade, or tandem disc or spring tooth or Lister furrowers, they would all have a brand on there. Deere, a lot from the Midwest. And it was pretty good stuff. It really was. We built over 7,000 ships in World War II. And we had the biggest Navy, as I keep saying, the biggest Navy that was bigger than all the others put together. And now we can't build more than, I think, 2 submarines a year.
Well, Victor, we're at the end of our show, so I would like to thank you for all of your wisdom today.
And thank everybody for writing about nostrums for chronic sinus infection.
Yeah.
I've been reading, and I really appreciate it. I still have it, but I think I'm scheduled for a procedure coming up that I'm hoping to put it off till summer. But I have a very good ENT.
There was one that wrote me about vitamin C as that had solved his problem.
I'd like to try that, except if you have kidney oxalate stones.
Oh, yeah, that's
I've had 3 kidney stone operations, and vitamin C actually will give you a kidney stone. So will vitamin D if you take it in excess for some people. So I'm just trying to, I went to the ENT yesterday and I've got a blocked sinus, but he thinks maybe I can make it until the summer.
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope you can. And thank you, Victor. And thanks to the audience as well for choosing to join us for this Friday News Roundup.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. It's much appreciated, and viewing as well.
Yes. This is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.